It's a little late. However, better late than never, I suppose. We're going to do a little wiring today. I've got a Seiju elm, nice little dwarf variety elm I picked up a little while ago, and it's kind of been my um, cutting mother tree nursery stock. It's not an amazing tree, but it's got really good internodes, leaf size. It's not a terrible branch structure, so it could become a tree in and of itself. But I've got things left on for developing good um, cuttings. So I've cleaned it out a little bit. I may need to do a little additional cleaning, but I've cleaned it out a bit and figured it'd be a great opportunity to do a good opportunity to do a wiring tutorial since it's so spread out, kind of broad. Be able to get some close-ups and whatnot, and actually see what's going on with the wire. So that being said, we'll get going on this and see if anybody joins in and have a good time. Just prepping for deciduous. I'm going to be using aluminum wire versus copper wire, annealed copper. It's a little bit softer on the bark, which means it's not going to get scratched up. It's also more pliable, so you'll be able to maneuver it, manipulate it a little bit easier. Generally, you want to start with the primary branch, that initial branch that's going to give motion to the tree and movement to the composition. This branch is a bit far out for anything that might be beneficial in an overall design. I'd probably prefer to keep this branch here, and there's a smaller one back behind this large one. This would probably need to be the front though, based on the apex. See, it's just not great material, but again, it's just been used to cut back and to create cuttings over and over and over again. So no problem. I took a bunch of cuttings already. So we're going to start with what we've got and work on doing some more cuttings there. Or doing some wiring on this. Just get rid of some stuff that's in the way. Generally, you want to choose a gauge of wire that's about a third the thickness of the branch. That's kind of the common theme there. However, with aluminum, doesn't have quite the holding capacity as copper wire. So you may need something a little bit thicker, but if you're getting into tiny little branches like this, pretty much anything's going to hold. Elms are very pliable. They're great trees to start out on wiring. With some forgiving material that'll really give you a little bit of movement. They're not brittle at all, so it's great. Generally, when you're wiring, you want an anchor point, so something that is above the other, so you can wrap one branch above the other, so you can get at least one wrap around the trunk, so that when you move the wire, the bottom portion doesn't move also. Usually something straight across is if you bend this, the wire on this side is going to bend that branch as well, and you don't want that, so you need at least one anchor point. What we're going to use as the anchor point is this little nub right here. No, copper does not kill trees. Copper is actually very beneficial because it does kill insects. There may be plant or bacteria as well. There may be plants that don't respond well to copper, but mancozeb is a common fungicide that we use, particularly in bonsai, in the horticultural world in general, that is copper based. And so you will actually give the trees extra doses of copper so that it can kill those fungus and some other pests as well. So no, it won't kill the trees. The biggest thing is that it may scar up the bark. But on a rough bark tree the like a pine or other conifers, even rough bark maples, it's okay to mess with to use copper versus aluminum because you're going to have a better holding capacity, and it's not, even if it does scratch up the bark a little, it's not going to be a big deal. But if you're scratching up smooth bark on any other maple, elms for example, hornbeam, you're going to see those scratches and those scars for a long time. I'm going to try and rotate it around just a little bit so my elbow's not always sitting in your face. One of the biggest things is when you're wrapping, don't twist around. I'm pulling, then I'm pulling down, and I'm moving more robotically than I am fluidly. And what you're looking for in the wire application is the same angle, the same spacing, but same angle and spacing between the rotations of the wire, and no gaps between the wire and the tree. There is a little bit of leeway in regards to if you have to go around the trunk. You don't necessarily want to be really tight around the trunk because that may grow, the trunk may grow into the wire a little quicker than the branches do, and that can affect your holding capacity on the branches. But generally, same angle, same spacing, no gaps. And then positioning, you work to bend the wire, not the branch. So you're putting the branch into a position, but you're focusing on bending the wire. So the general movement for deciduous is kind of an up and out movement. So you go up and then out, whereas conifers, you come down from the shoulder. So we're gonna, as we bend, we're gonna twist. Trees don't have joints. This is the best way I've found to explain it. We can scratch our back because we have an elbow. Trees don't. So if you didn't have an elbow, how are you gonna scratch your back? So twisting the branch as we bend essentially acts as that joint that the tree is missing. And you want to make sure you're twisting with the rotation of the wire, otherwise you're spinning your wire off of the tree. Some people use tools to bend the wire. I generally don't, so I can feel the tissue in the tree a little bit better. Hopefully avoid any unnecessary damage to it. But you'll actually feel it stretch and pull, and hopefully not tear too much. But right before it pops, you'll be able to feel it, rather than if you're using a tool, you won't have that opportunity. I'm missing. Cut that off there. I'm going to root those later on. I want to, don't need much more thickness on that, so we'll just cut that off here. Go. And so you can see here we've got a nice narrow pad. We're going to try and pull those down throughout the tree. So even though this is kind of my mother stock for cuttings of the Seiju elm, I want it to look nice to potentially have it as a tree. it's always going to produce a lot of branching. So I'm not worried about it not being, you know, supplying stock for the future as far as cuttings go. So that being said, I'm going to style it out and give it its fair chance of becoming a bonsai, and still be able to use it in the future for something that's productively at the nursery here. So one thing is this portion has a long section without any foliage on it, so maybe we prune that off, but I'm going to apply wire and shape it before, because it's easier to shape and manipulate branching that's long rather than short. So that's one focus there as well. Always keeping in mind the overall generality of design as you're working with the tree. And with wiring, I usually work from the bottom up. We'll see. Whereas pruning, sometimes you can work from the top down. Yeah, this isn't necessarily the best time to wire, but it's also not the worst. I just have to pay attention that the wire doesn't cut in and scar too easily. And with that in mind, anything that's smaller gauge wire for these tiny branches, I'm not going to be wrapping it right up against the trunk really tight to the tree. I'm going to give it a little bit of room so that as it grows it won't cut in right away. So just some big loops, but enough to get some movement on there. And get these vertical branches down horizontal, things like that. This big nub of heavy wires bugging me. There we go. Just to get some movement in there. Work that out. There we go. And this branching will probably come back and remove much of it, just because it's right in the front. But it'll be a nice little pad to cover up some of this bareness. Elms do backbud fairly proficiently, but if you've got a branch on the tree that's good for it, that'll help. You don't want to necessarily chop that nub off either, sticking straight out or almost straight out, because then you'd have a really big scar and a large bare spot. Maybe it comes off in the future, but I'm not too concerned with it right now. So I'm just going to use those two branches coming out of it to help kind of define that pad and add some taper. But it'll probably come out back to here in the end. See if we can pull this down a little bit. There's some fairly large nodules on here, but I think it may turn out to be a pretty decent tree in the end. Or at least a nice transition from raw material to something a little more finished. When I say finished, I mean set up for the future, not finished as in now it goes into a show. So a couple wraps of wire there just to stabilize it. Then I'm going to come over to the other side and wire that all the way out. go finish up the other side. All right, and some people will wire out the whole tree and then shape it all. I tend to do it branch by branch just because if I end up wanting to cut something off, I haven't wasted wire. Although it's good to practice. So that popped just a bit. Let me see if I can show you real quick. Right there. Whoops. Lost it. Sorry about that. The adverts on here, buy Bitcoin and whatnot, whatever. But right here you can see a little bit of green poking through. That is where it started to tear, and I felt it, the bark pop just a bit. So I held off. Didn't worry about that. And was able to stop because my hands were on it. I could feel it as it popped. Didn't necessarily have to be a visual thing at all. From back here. Back here as well. Let this do its thing. There's quite a bunch of branching here. We're going to try and avoid those nodules developing any more than they already have throughout the tree. Get rid of any inverse taper. These things we're not going to worry about. Sorry, we're a little off. We're not going to worry about wiring things like this because it'll actually be better to wire them as they've got a little girth on them. We're going to see if we can pull this branch down a bit, but it's got this huge nodule that's developed right here, so it may not bend very well. But the last thing I want to do, which means it's going to happen, but the last thing I want to do is break this off because it's a great it's a good point of bifurcation. There we go. Laid that right down, just where we wanted it. Prune it back to here. Get rid of this vertical growth because we've got horizontal growth. If I didn't have horizontal growth right there, I wouldn't get rid of the vertical growth. I'd just wait till it developed enough that I could lay it down. That's all that is. So this could potentially come down, be part of that pad. So I'm going to leave it on there. It usually works out pretty well. There we go. This one probably could be wired. So let's do it. It's the difference is whether it's lignified or not. This isn't really lignified, and it's got foliage all along, so it's going to be a little tougher. You'll probably do more damage than good. This one's lignified. There's a little room to wire, and you've got a counter branch right here, so it should be all right getting in there. Anybody has any questions about anything, like earlier with the copper, shout it out. Get things answered. Wiring is one of those processes where it takes just a little bit more focus. So if I zone out, I mean, it's no big deal. Just, I may not notice things quite as quickly or be talking as much about what's going on. So I'll try and remember to be conscious of that. There we go. It's got other branches coming out of there, so we'll take care of that. That'll eventually lay down. There we go. So we got our first pad developing there. Again, it's no show tree, but it is developing out of fairly primitive nursery stock into something that could be set up for the future. Right, and that's what most of everybody's first trees are. Yeah, no problem. I'm using aluminum wire for this deciduous tree, this elm, primarily because it's softer, so it's not going to scratch up the bark on application, and it gives a little more leeway as far as the tree growing into the wire. The biggest difference between aluminum and your copper wire, just so y'all can see, so the biggest difference between your copper and your aluminum is that aluminum has a better holding capacity because it work hardens. The more you bend it, the stiffer and harder it's going to be to bend, right? So aluminum, you can wad it up, sometimes with big, complicated, congested trees. I'll even, just to get the wire in there started, I will roll up and wad up the end of the wire in a roll as much as I need to be able to put it into the tree without as much difficulty getting it through, wrapping it around the branches. So, and then you can, when you unwire, you can unwire it and then straighten it back out and reuse it. Aluminum is very forgiving as far as wire goes. No need to wire this. It's a little bit thicker, so it would be tougher. You can do various series of cuts, maybe a guy wire. You can see how that pulls it down a bit if I applied a guy wire, but it would also straighten out that branch. It really wouldn't give me an arching bend. So I'm going to let that grow out, let this foliage do its thing, and then use those to give the arch as well. But the nice thing about it is, another reason I'm not concerned with being able to bend it, is that from here it comes up slightly in the back. So it gives me another layer of foliage here versus everything being on the same plane. And a lot of the length is being left on these because as they develop, they'll be pruned back, but we want them to grow out to get some thickness and then prune back and get that taper. So we're kind of, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back, and you work that way with deciduous trees. What's next? Something like this. Yeah, maybe we'll put a little bit of wire on there. These little frilly things don't need much. We'll see if we can apply a guy wire to the top and see if we can crank that down a bit. If it doesn't work how I want it to, or if something breaks, we can always use some of this foliage to develop the new apex. It's a little bit thick, but there is some taper between here to here and then this branch to this branch. So, in the continuation of the trunk line. So we'll do the big things, see if they work, and if they don't, no harm, no foul. those down, that'll be nice. So we'll have 1, 2, maybe 3, 4 pieces of wire, and this tree will be done. We could wire that down if we like, but there's really no point as far as that goes. It'd probably be better for it, less risk of damage to wire it when it's just a little bit thicker. If you run into foliage as you're wiring, just wiggle the wire back and forth till it fits between those branches or those leaf petioles. There we go. That's not the front, although it looks better than the current front as far as the structure goes. Maybe that is the front. The branching stays the same. The only difficulty is this thing's funkier now. But if we lay those down, that'll work out just right. Which means we want to move in and then away, because moving in towards another branch is going to give you an acute angle rather than a big obtuse angle, and acute angles are much more natural. So they're more aesthetic. So with that in mind, first movement should always be in towards your other branch and then out, then fan out to create that path. Go. I'm tempted to cut this back so that this is what will develop into the apex, but maybe this can come down and give us something interesting as well. The only other problem is this is a big gnarly knob. You can see kind of how nasty it is, so maybe we cut that off down to here. And it's a shame to not air layer it, but it'll give me plenty of cuttings to root. So I think we'll go ahead and do that. This isn't the best time to do a major cut, but a tree like this is going to be just fine with a cut like that. So we'll make that cut real quick. And we'll regrow out the top over the next couple years. We get rid of a major impediment as far as the aesthetic goes. And we're going to cut this at an angle so that we don't see that scar from the front. And then we will give it a generous dose of cut paste to help it heal up. The best time to do major cuts like that, well, I tend to do major cuts like that before the initial flush of growth in the late winter. There's all sorts of reasons to do it at various times in the year. Now is not the worst time, but for my area, it's not necessarily the best time either, but it's going to be just fine. So I've got a wire here that I want and a wire there. This one seems like it would prove better to be a guy wire, so we'll go ahead and strap that on there. And that'll be that. Let's see where we want to apply that. Okay. See how that just pulls it right down, lays it down where we'd like it. And eventually that tree will heal into that position, that branch, I should say. Let's see from the front what we've got. So we've got this thing that's obstructing our view. So maybe we'll wire that down so it looks just a little bit neater as we go along. You do want to be very careful not to crush any of the foliage. There's no way around it, just remove the foliage rather than crush it. Then the tree's not going to allocate resources to try and save it, and waste a bunch of energy trying to fix this branch and potentially throw out new growth in a place that you definitely don't want it. Down, rotate it around, flatten out the pad, and there you have it. So now there's a little bit more distantiation and differentiation between this upper pad and this pad below. Eventually this will all probably be pushed back quite a bit, so that the terminus of these pads is more here rather than way out here. But there's that. Definitely need the apex looking to these branches. You can't see them because my finger's there, but this branch here to come out and fill in this space and these two to form eventually the apex that'll come around right about there. This looks like it's coming straight at you for now, so let's adjust those to be more horizontal. Great. And then this is the next issue. As these branches develop, they're going to flatten out. Essentially be right where my hand is. They're going to flatten out and then extend beyond, or maybe stay within this larger apical region here. What about this guy? Yep, he'll come down too. This is the biggest thing that we really just can't do right now because these branches aren't thick enough to really be worth messing with. But yeah, flatten those out, get something right in here. Maybe even shorten this branch, so instead of it being terminated here, being that thick all the way out, we'll bring it back into here. Shorten up that portion and then let these branches grow out from there. But it's got a good background, which is much nicer actually with this nub and these two little things being in the background rather than the foreground. we can use them to drop down. Give us a little interest in backdrop rather than them being sticking straight out. So it'll stop your eye from seeing right through the tree. And there's just a tad bit of growth right here. But maybe this one comes up to fill that spot. Right? And as that fills out, it'll become a nice pad. As this one fills out, it'll do the same. And you'll have a backstop here and here to fill in. It'll all change a bit as it progresses, but for now, we've done pretty much all we can to make sure this tree's set up to actually have some kind of shape. Of course, we'll keep utilizing it to create new tiny trees, take cuttings, root them, and move along. But a fun little tutorial, quick little how-to on wire on a tree that, again, I usually wire my deciduous in the fall so that the wire can stay on longer over the winter. Less likely the tree grows into the wire and causes scarring. However, it's a fine time to do it because you've cleaned it out, so there's not quite as much foliage on there, and you can get in there and really see the branches better than, definitely better than the summer. But it's also moving nutrients through the tree consistently enough at this point in time that it's going to heal into shape fairly quickly, which means also you're going to need to remove that wire sooner rather than later as far as scarring goes. So keep an eye on it if you wire now. Otherwise, see if you can wire in the fall and just work on that. But I thought it'd be a good time to show this off. I think it's a good time to just let it go. Been going all day, but was glad I got some time carved out to jump on here and run y'all through wiring. If I had something else that was small enough and accessible enough right now at the moment, I'd go grab it. But seeing as I don't, it's a good time to log off and see y'all later. Bonsai on, y'all.